The stars hung low over the sleepy town of Fairbrook, casting silver shadows over the quiet streets. Autumn had begun to paint the trees gold, and the crisp air was filled with the scent of dry leaves and chimney smoke. Inside room 214 of Fairbrook Regional Medical Center, Marissa Hale sat with her daughter Ava curled against her chest, their hospital bed illuminated by the faint glow of medical monitors. Marissa's body trembled, not from the chill of the hospital's AC, but from a cocktail of exhaustion and dread. Ava, only 4 years old, lay frail and flushed with fever, her breaths shallow. Hours ago, her temperature had skyrocketed. She had slipped into a dazed stupor, unable to keep her eyes open or form words. It had started as a simple cold. Marissa had thought it was nothing serious. But 3 days in, things had spiraled. Now, the doctors were talking about emergency brain surgery. Marissa's hand clutched her phone as she paced the room, her other arm holding Ava protectively. Her heart thudded against her ribcage as she pressed the dial button again. She had called 6 times already. Still no answer. She wiped the tears from her cheek with the back of her hand as her husband's voicemail kicked in once more. "Hi, it's me," she whispered. "Please, I need you. Ava. She's really sick. They said she needs surgery, and, please, just call me back." Click. End call. Her husband, Jacob Hale, was a man others admired. A successful investor, always seen in tailored suits and expensive shoes, always on the phone with big deals. Marissa had once believed him to be brilliant, ambitious, even charming. They'd met during a fundraiser gala for a local children's charity. How ironic now. He had swept her off her feet, promised her the world, and delivered a gilded cage. She had traded her career in education to become a full-time mother after Ava was born. Jacob said he wanted a classic home, and Marissa, smitten and naive, agreed. Their mansion in North Fairbrook was picture perfect. But beneath the polished surface, Jacob's affections had become rare, his presence even rarer. And now, in the darkest hour of their family's life, he was silent. A knock on the door pulled Marissa from her thoughts. It was Dr. Leon, the neurosurgeon assigned to Ava. He was calm, but there was no masking the urgency in his voice. "Mrs. Hale, I won't lie to you. The infection has spread to your daughter's brain. The only option is immediate surgery." Marissa's knees buckled slightly. "Surgery? But is she going to be okay? If we operate now, there's a high chance of full recovery," he explained. "But we need your approval, and a financial deposit, right away. The total is $280,000. We require at least 75% upfront to proceed." The number hit her like ice water. Marissa's heart stopped. $280,000? She echoed. "We don't have that in cash, surely Jacob can handle this." "I'm sorry, but we can't delay," the doctor replied gently. "Time is critical. If she deteriorates further." Marissa didn't wait for the rest. She called Jacob again. And again. On the 4th call, he finally picked up. "What is it?" came Jacob's voice, irritated, not concerned. "She needs surgery," Marissa said, trying to hold herself together. "Ava, Jacob, she's not going to make it without it. It's over 200 grand. Please, please come. Help us." There was silence on the line. Then a sigh. "I'm in Tokyo. Meeting with investors. You know that, Jacob." "Don't be dramatic, Marissa," he snapped. "She's a kid. Kids get sick. She's dying." Marissa screamed. More silence. Then, coldly, "You always overreact. Look, I'm not draining my assets for some overblown medical panic. Figure something out. You're her mother." And with that, the line went dead. Marissa stood frozen. For a moment, everything stopped, the machines, the air, the thrum of her pulse. She looked down at Ava, her baby, barely breathing. Then something inside her snapped. No more waiting. No more pleading. She raced from the hospital, Ava in her arms, and called a friend to drive them home. Once there, she tore through her jewelry case, wedding ring, her grandmother's emerald brooch, the diamond tennis bracelet Jacob gave her on their first anniversary. All of it. She threw the pieces into a velvet pouch and sprinted to the nearest 24-hour pawnshop. The clerk, an elderly man with watery eyes, looked at the pouch and the desperation on her face. He offered her $72,000, everything he could reasonably give. She cried, not because it wasn't enough, but because someone, anyone, had helped. Marissa ran back to the hospital, where Dr. Leon was already prepping the team. She handed over every cent. The hospital hesitated but agreed to proceed, trusting she'd pay the rest. The surgery began. Marissa sat alone in the cold waiting room, numb and silent. Her phone rested uselessly in her lap. She no longer waited for Jacob's calls. She didn't expect anything. Hours passed. Finally, Dr. Leon emerged. His mask hung around his neck, and his expression was tired, but warm. "She made it," he said. "She's going to be okay." Marissa collapsed forward, a sob of relief escaping her lips. The floor never felt so solid beneath her knees. But even as she thanked the heavens, a dark truth bloomed inside her. Jacob hadn't called. Hadn't shown up. Hadn't even asked if Ava lived. And suddenly, the realization hit her with terrifying clarity. He didn't care. Not about Ava. Not about her. The life she thought she had was a lie. And when she returned home days later, what she would discover would make her wish he had simply abandoned them. Because what he did next would turn betrayal into full-blown war. It had been 4 days since Ava's surgery. Marissa Hale hadn't left her daughter's side, not even for a minute. She slept in a hospital chair, spoon-fed Ava broth when she could eat again, and brushed back her sweat-damp curls while humming lullabies into the sterile air. The beeping monitors became background noise, a dull reminder that her little girl was still alive. And still, there was no word from Jacob. No text. No call. Not even a question from him about whether Ava had survived. Marissa had stopped expecting one. She'd also stopped crying. Something inside her had shifted. The woman who used to wait at the door for her husband to return from overseas trips, who used to hang on every message, every word of approval, was gone. The woman sitting in the hospital now was different, quieter, colder, and, more than anything else, awake. On the 5th day, Ava was finally discharged. Her recovery was going well, better than the doctors expected. Still weak, she leaned into Marissa's chest as they walked out into the pale morning light. Marissa helped her buckle into the car seat and kissed her forehead. "We're going home," she whispered. "You're safe now, baby." She tried to believe it. The drive through Fairbrook was long and quiet. The once cozy neighborhoods looked different, like replicas of her old life. Marissa's heart beat a little faster the closer she got to their house, a 3-story stone-front estate nestled between manicured hedges and gated drives. Jacob's black sports car was parked in the driveway. For the briefest moment, Marissa felt a flicker of foolish hope. Maybe, just maybe, he was inside. Maybe he'd changed his mind. Maybe he'd apologize, hold Ava, cry for her, beg Marissa to forgive him. She knew it was unlikely, borderline delusional, but grief does strange things to the heart. With Ava in her arms, she walked up the porch steps, used her key, and opened the front door. That's when she heard the laughter. Not Jacob's. A woman's. It came from the living room, light and melodic, with an edge that grated on Marissa's spine. She stepped inside slowly. Ava stirred, sensing her mother's tension. The scene in the living room froze her in place. Jacob was standing there, shirt half-buttoned, holding a glass of wine, and next to him was a woman Marissa had never seen before. She was tall, statuesque, with a model's cheekbones and a smug smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her perfectly manicured hand rested lightly on Jacob's chest. They looked cozy. Intimate. Marissa's lips parted, but no words came. Jacob looked up, unbothered. "Oh. You're back." That was all he said. Not "How's Ava?" Not "Thank God she's okay." Not even "I'm sorry." Just a flat, emotionless "Oh." "Who is she?" Marissa finally managed, her voice shaking. "This is Selena," he said coolly. "She's with me now." Marissa blinked. "What?" "She's living here," he continued, as if giving her a weather update. "We've been together for a few months." "A few?" Marissa clutched Ava tighter. "You were seeing her while our daughter was in the hospital? While she was dying?" "I told you I didn't want to be dragged down," he snapped, stepping forward. "You're always emotional. Dramatic. And Ava? She's just sick all the time. It's exhausting." "Exhausting?" Marissa gasped. "She almost died. I begged you to help us." Selena leaned in the doorway, sipping her wine with a raised brow. "This seems like a personal issue," she said lightly. "Maybe you two should talk outside?" Marissa stared at her, stunned. "You knew he had a family." "I knew he needed out of one," Selena said with a shrug. "I'm just the one who helped him admit it." Jacob walked past Marissa and opened the front door. "You need to leave," he said. "I've already packed some of your things. They're in the garage." "Leave?" Her voice broke. "This is my home too. It's under my name," he said. "You can take the car if you want." "That's generous." "And Ava? She's your responsibility now," he said, his tone flat. "I'm not a babysitter. I didn't sign up for this." Marissa's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. Selena smiled faintly from behind him. "Best of luck, Grace." "Oh, sorry, Marissa." Marissa was shaking, but not from fear. From fury. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice low. Jacob's eyes narrowed. "Is that a threat?" "No," she replied. "It's a promise." But he didn't listen. The door slammed in her face with finality. She stood on the porch with Ava cradled in her arms, the autumn wind brushing through her hair. Behind her, a life she had built for nearly a decade was being dismantled by another woman's laughter. She didn't move. Not for a long time. Not until her arms began to ache. Then, slowly, with quiet rage boiling in her chest, she walked away, down the driveway, past the black car, through the neighborhood that once felt like home. She had nowhere to go. No plan. No money. But she had Ava. And she had fire. And that was enough to start something new. Because Jacob Hale had made one fatal mistake. He thought she would stay broken. He thought wrong. The night was cold, but Marissa Hale barely felt it. Her right arm ached from holding Ava, who had finally drifted into a quiet, exhausted sleep against her shoulder. The weight of her child grounded her, but did nothing to still the storm swirling inside her. She had no home now. No family. No money. And yet, she kept walking. Her legs moved on instinct. Her mind was fractured between panic, pain, and a fury that no longer boiled, it burned. Every step echoed with Jacob's betrayal. Every breath stung with the memory of his face as he slammed the door in hers. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was annihilation. She didn't even realize where she was until headlights flared across her vision. A silver sedan pulled up near the edge of the street, and the window rolled down. "Marissa?" The voice, female, familiar, cut through the haze. It was Michelle. Michelle had been her best friend once, before marriage and motherhood had distanced them. A warm soul, fiercely protective, Michelle had always sensed something was off about Jacob. She just never pushed. Marissa hadn't spoken to her in months. Now she was here, like a lighthouse in the dark. "Oh my God," Michelle gasped as she stepped out and ran toward them. "What happened?" Marissa couldn't answer. Her voice failed her. Michelle took Ava gently, holding her as if she were her own. "Let's get you both inside." The warmth of the car was almost unbearable after the cold. Marissa's tears came then, silent and unrelenting. Michelle didn't ask questions right away. She just drove, calm, steady, safe. They pulled up to a modest brick building a few blocks away, the Haven Center, a privately funded shelter Michelle helped run. Marissa had always thought of it as a place for other women, those fleeing physical abuse or homelessness. She never imagined she'd need it herself. But here she was. Once inside, a kind woman named Clara brought Marissa a blanket and warm tea. Ava was tucked into a small cot in a shared mother-child room, snuggled beneath donated quilts. Only then did Michelle sit across from her, watching with careful eyes. "Start from the beginning," she said softly. "I'm here." And so Marissa told her everything. She spoke through a trembling voice about Ava's sudden illness, the surgery, the hospital's demand for payment, and Jacob's indifference. She told her about pawning her jewelry, selling her wedding ring, the desperate calls and voicemails that were never answered. She told her how she walked into her own home to find her husband with another woman, and how he cast her and Ava out like garbage. And finally, she spoke of the metal candle holder, how Jacob had lifted it in rage and brought it down against her shoulder when she confronted him, while Ava clung to her and screamed. Michelle's eyes darkened. Her fingers curled into fists. "That coward," she hissed. "He hurt you in front of your daughter?" Marissa nodded. "I think. My shoulder's not broken, but I can't lift my arm properly." Michelle stood up immediately. "You need a doctor. Tonight." An hour later, they were at a 24-hour clinic. Dr. Farley, a gentle older man with kind eyes, confirmed that there were no fractures, just deep bruising and soft tissue damage. He prescribed medication, recommended rest, and filled out a detailed report. Michelle didn't wait. She had the clinic fax the report straight to the Haven Center's legal advisor. "We're not letting this go," she told Marissa. Back at the shelter, Marissa finally slept, but it wasn't restful. Her dreams were filled with Jacob's sneering face, Ava's cry, the echo of laughter from that other woman. But by morning, she woke to something unexpected. Resolve. The kind she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't about revenge. Not entirely. It was about reclaiming what had been taken, not just her home or marriage, but her sense of self. Her dignity. Her strength. Michelle noticed the change immediately. "You look like you're plotting something," she teased. "I'm done being quiet," Marissa said. "He thinks I'll disappear. He thinks I'm nothing without him. I want to prove him wrong." Michelle leaned in. "Then let's start with the truth." She pulled out a contact card and handed it to her. "Austin Reed," she said. "Private investigator. The best I know." Marissa hesitated. "You think Jacob's hiding something?" Michelle tilted her head. "You said it yourself, he changed overnight. Left you and Ava like it was nothing. You think that's just about a new girlfriend? No. He's not just a bad husband. He's a man with something to lose." That night, Austin met them at the shelter. He was in his 50s, with a calm demeanor and sharp, observant eyes. He wore a worn blazer and carried a leather-bound notebook. He listened as Marissa recounted everything again. He didn't interrupt. He just nodded, jotted things down, asked the right questions. When she was done, he tapped his pen against the page. "I've heard 100 stories like this," he said. "But yours? It's not just betrayal. It's damage control. He pushed you out because you were liability." Marissa felt a chill run down her spine. "Liability?" Austin nodded. "Men like Jacob? They don't build empires honestly. And they sure as hell don't destroy their families unless they're protecting something bigger." He leaned forward. "I'll find out what." The next few days passed in a blur. Marissa helped around the shelter when she could, distracting herself with Ava's recovery. Ava, ever resilient, began smiling again, though she still clung to Marissa's side whenever a door creaked open too loud. Meanwhile, Austin was working. And 1 week later, he returned with a folder under his arm and a grim expression. "You'll want to sit down," he said. Marissa did. And when he opened that folder, the world she thought she had already lost shattered again. Bank records. Shell corporations. Overseas transactions. Photos of Jacob with Selena at exclusive fundraisers, events that, Austin confirmed, were fronts for laundering stolen investor funds. Jacob wasn't just a cheater. He was a criminal. "He's been moving millions through fake business deals," Austin said. "Fraud. Embezzlement. Wire scams. And Selena? Not just his mistress, she's his partner. They've been doing this for years." Marissa stared at the documents, barely breathing. "So that's why," she whispered. That's why he pushed me out. Ava and I. We were a threat. You were collateral, Austin said gently. He thought you'd disappear. That you'd be too broken to fight. Marissa slowly closed the folder, her jaw tight. He thought wrong. Michelle placed a comforting hand on her back. We take this to the police. Now. Marissa nodded. But that's not all. I want custody. I want every legal asset he owns. And I want him behind bars. Austin's lips curled in a rare smile. Then let's get to work. Because now it wasn't just about survival. It was about justice. Marissa Hale had always been someone who avoided confrontation. She was the peacekeeper at family dinners, the silent one during arguments, the woman who let things go for the sake of harmony. But those days were over. Now, with a mountain of evidence sitting on the shelter's office table, she was preparing for the fight of her life, and not just for herself, but for Ava. The morning after Austin's revelation, the shelter buzzed with quiet determination. Michelle had already connected with a pro bono legal advocacy group that specialized in complex domestic abuse and financial crime cases. With them came Brittany Caldwell, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney who had the posture of a warrior and the voice of a diplomat. We're not just going to file charges, Brittany said as she flipped through the documents Austin had collected. We're going to burn him down from the inside out. Marissa nodded, her fists clenched tightly in her lap. But even with all the documents, they needed more. They needed live testimony, someone from the inside who could corroborate the fraud, the laundering, the manipulation. And that meant one thing. Finding someone Jacob had burned. Austin already had a lead. There's a man named Ryan Maddox, he said during their afternoon strategy session in the shelter's tiny conference room. He was Jacob's former chief financial officer. Resigned last year under mysterious circumstances. I've tracked him to a quiet suburb 2 hours out. I think he'll talk. Marissa raised an eyebrow. Why would he help? Austin leaned back, eyes narrowed. Because Jacob didn't just fire him. He blacklisted him. I have emails. Ryan lost everything, his career, reputation, even his house. He has every reason to want revenge. Let's go, Marissa said without hesitation. No, Michelle interrupted gently. Let Austin go. You need to stay with Ava. You're her anchor right now. Marissa reluctantly agreed, though every part of her wanted to sit across from Ryan and demand justice with her own voice. But Michelle was right, Ava came first. She always would. That night, as Ava drifted to sleep under her favorite cartoon blanket, Marissa sat beside her with the warm glow of the bedside lamp casting shadows on the walls. She watched her daughter breathe, soft, steady, safe, and swore silently that Jacob Hale would never again come near her. 2 days later, Austin returned with Ryan Maddox in tow. He was in his mid-40s, lean, with tired eyes and the kind of quiet rage that simmers beneath politeness. When he entered the shelter's office, he shook Marissa's hand firmly. I knew something like this would happen, he said. I just didn't think it would be his own wife he'd destroy to protect himself. Ryan didn't just talk, he had saved things. Folders. Emails. Backups of wire transfers. He even had audio recordings of conversations with Jacob during their final months of working together. You kept all of this? Brittany asked, eyebrows raised. I knew I might need it one day, he replied. Men like him always overreach. They think they're untouchable. Between Ryan's testimony and Austin's records, the legal team built a case that was nearly airtight. They compiled it meticulously: financial fraud, identity manipulation, offshore laundering, and a history of coercive abuse. But Marissa's story wasn't just buried in documents. It was in the bruise on her shoulder. In the screenshots of unanswered calls. In the hospital receipts where she had sold everything to save Ava while Jacob ignored her from across the world. This is more than white-collar crime, Brittany said one night as they reviewed everything. This is psychological and financial abuse. Domestic violence. Neglect. Emotional cruelty. They submitted the case to the state district attorney's office on a Tuesday morning. By Thursday, things moved faster than anyone expected. Jacob Hale's office was raided. His files seized. Selena was taken in for questioning. The news hit local outlets like wildfire. Breaking: Fairbrook entrepreneur investigated for fraud and domestic abuse allegations. The image that ran on the news wasn't the Jacob Marissa had known, the suave, confident man in polished suits. It was a still frame from the moment authorities walked him out of his luxury office in handcuffs. Marissa sat on the shelter's worn couch, Ava curled up next to her, as the broadcast played in the background. Michelle stood nearby, phone buzzing non-stop. "You did it," she said quietly. But Marissa didn't feel triumph. Not yet. That would come in the courtroom. The day of the trial was cloudy. Marissa arrived at the courthouse wearing a navy blue blazer and a pale cream blouse. Her hair was pulled back, simple and neat. She looked in the mirror before leaving and saw someone she barely recognized, not the woman Jacob had silenced, but the woman she was always meant to become. Ava stayed behind with shelter volunteers. She didn't need to see what came next. Inside the courtroom, Jacob sat across from her at the defense table. His hair was shorter now. His suit no longer tailored. There was no trace of the man who once looked at her like she was the center of the universe. Now, he looked small. Cornered. Nervous. Selena was there too, seated beside her own attorney, visibly agitated. Marissa noted the distance between them, the cracks in their alliance already showing. Brittany stood up and began the prosecution's case with razor-sharp precision. She walked the jury through the fraud, the criminal deception, the stolen investor money. Then, as the room tensed, she moved into the personal side. She spoke of a 4-year-old girl fighting for her life in a hospital bed. Of a mother who pawned everything she owned to save her child. Of a man who responded to desperate calls for help by ignoring them. And then casting them both out like trash. Then came the photos. Marissa's bruised shoulder. Ava's hospital records. The candle holder that Jacob had lifted in anger. And finally, Marissa herself took the stand. She spoke slowly, steadily. Not to elicit pity, but to tell the truth. She told them about how Jacob had isolated her, dismissed her concerns, erased her voice. How he had lied, cheated, and eventually hurt her in the most primal way a man can betray his family, abandonment in a time of need. When Brittany asked her the final question, "What do you want the jury to understand about Jacob Hale?" Marissa looked straight ahead. "That I trusted him with everything," she said. "And he tried to destroy us to protect a lie." Her voice didn't shake. She didn't cry. She was done doing that. It didn't take long for the jury to deliberate. Guilty. On all counts. Financial fraud. Money laundering. Aggravated assault. Domestic violence. The judge's sentence was clear and devastating: 25 years without parole. Full financial restitution to affected investors and full legal ownership of the Hale estate and assets granted to Marissa and Ava. The courtroom was still as Jacob was taken away. He didn't look at Marissa. He didn't speak. She didn't need him to. Outside, reporters clamored for statements, but Marissa didn't stop to talk. She just walked out into the cool breeze, Michelle at her side, her lawyer smiling behind her. They had done it. And though the road ahead would be long and uncertain, one thing was crystal clear. Marissa Hale was free. And she was never going back. 2 months after Jacob Hale was sentenced, Marissa stood at the edge of a new beginning. The morning sun streamed through the wide kitchen window of her new home, a modest but cozy cottage on the outskirts of Fairbrook, nestled between tall oaks and blooming lavender. It wasn't a mansion. It didn't have imported countertops or a wine cellar. But it had everything she needed: safety, space, and silence where there used to be screaming. It was hers. No joint accounts. No looming threats. Just a title deed in her name, granted by the court using legally acquired assets recovered from Jacob's estate. A house where Ava could grow up with sunlight, love, and laughter, not fear. On that quiet morning, Marissa stood barefoot on the wooden floor, sipping a warm mug of tea, watching Ava chase butterflies in the backyard. The bruises were gone now, both on her skin and, slowly, from her soul. She still had nightmares, but they were less frequent. Ava sometimes woke up crying, asking if Daddy was coming back, and each time, Marissa knelt beside her and whispered the same thing. "No, baby. He can't hurt us anymore. We're safe now." But safety wasn't enough. Not anymore. Marissa wanted purpose. She had lost so many years in Jacob's shadow, and she was ready to reclaim them, not as a wife or victim, but as herself. That's when the idea began to take root. During her weeks at the shelter, she'd spent countless hours comforting other women, young mothers, aging grandmothers, even teenagers, who had lived through horrors of their own. Some had been hit. Others silenced. Some still bore the fresh wounds of betrayal. But every single one of them had asked her the same quiet question. "How did you survive?" And Marissa always answered the same way. "I didn't just survive. I rebuilt." That truth became the seed of a mission. With Michelle's help, Marissa launched the Phoenix Project, a nonprofit aimed at helping women escape cycles of emotional and financial abuse. It started small, one desk, a few volunteers, and a single donated office space, but it grew fast. The media had covered her trial, and soon, survivors across the country were reaching out. Donations trickled in. Former clients became volunteers. Marissa didn't lead from a pedestal. She led from experience. She sat with women and held their hands as they wept. She walked them through legal paperwork, helped them apply for emergency housing, and stood beside them in court when they were too scared to go alone. Every time she told her story, she didn't feel weaker. She felt stronger. Like each retelling pulled another nail out of the coffin Jacob had tried to bury her in. Meanwhile, Ava thrived. She started preschool, where she made friends easily. She painted rainbows and asked 1,000 questions a day. She still had scars, emotional ones, but Marissa was helping her build a world where love was consistent and safe. One evening, as they sat together on the front porch, Ava leaned her head against Marissa's shoulder and asked, "Mommy, are we going to be okay forever?" Marissa smiled, pressing a kiss to her daughter's hair. "We already are, sweetheart." But her journey wasn't just about healing. It was about empowerment. One day, a letter arrived from the Fairbrook District Attorney's office. They were organizing a panel on financial and domestic abuse survivors and wanted Marissa to speak as the keynote guest. At first, she hesitated. Standing in a courtroom had been one thing, but sharing her story to a crowd of strangers? That felt different. But she said yes. And on a warm spring afternoon, dressed in a simple navy dress, Marissa stood at the podium of a packed auditorium. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the room as she began. "I used to be the woman who smiled through silence," she said. "I thought if I stayed quiet, things would get better. They didn't. I thought if I gave enough, he'd love me more. He didn't. I thought I had no power. But I was wrong." She spoke of love, of loss, of fear and courage. Of a little girl who nearly died. Of a door slammed in her face. Of how she chose to rise from the ashes. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Women came forward in tears. Men stood in quiet solidarity. Lawmakers asked for meetings. Young girls asked for hugs. It was more than vindication. It was victory. A year after the trial, Marissa hosted a picnic at her new home. The Phoenix Project team gathered in her backyard, spreading blankets under trees, while children ran through sprinklers and volunteers swapped stories and laughter. Ava was in the center of it all, giggling with a pink balloon tied to her wrist. Michelle toasted with a lemonade in hand. To Marissa, she said, "The fiercest phoenix I've ever known." Everyone clapped. Marissa blushed, but she didn't deflect like she used to. She accepted it, because it was true. Later that night, after everyone had left and Ava was asleep, Marissa stood by the window, watching the stars blink in the sky. She thought of the girl she used to be, the one who whispered apologies into the silence of a cold mansion, The one who begged for love from a man who had none to give. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman reborn. A mother. A warrior. A voice for the voiceless. Marissa Hale had been broken, but she had rebuilt every piece. Not to become who she was before, but to become something entirely new. Unshakable. Unapologetic. Unforgettable. And the world would never silence her again.